As you can see here, I'm doing the AFL rivalries and making it into a tier list. Going to be ranking every AFL rivalry that they've given us. Starting off with the showdown, Adelaide, Port Adelaide. I'm a big fan of this rivalry. There's a lot of history to it before the AFL, and now even recently, the games are always good. Last season, Jordan Dawson, after the goal siren, win for Adelaide. This season, Adelaide winning again when they didn't expect it. The goal from Stephen Motlop very late in that fourth quarter a couple years ago.
Crash down, flash point, Stevie Motlop, what a time! Oh! He is floating on it!
The showdown is always a recipe for success. The crowd there, I've never been, but you can just hear the crowd from the TV when you are listening to it. That's an elite rivalry. That for me is ultimate. Essendon Collingwood, that's also really, now that's a heritage rivalry. The Anzac Day game doesn't get much bigger than these two clubs. Two of the biggest fan bases in the AFL, not the biggest, but two of the biggest. I'm going to put this in brings in a crowd. Now for me, it's just not as good as the showdown, especially in recent years, but who could forget games like the Zaharakis goal.
He goes short, it's a mark to Zaharakis! Zaharakis has kicked a goal! The Bombers are in front of the G!
The Dane Swan tummy rub celebration.
Chambers with a tap, Swan running through and kicks his third.
It's always a great game. The Anzac Day actual event is a brilliant night. Next up, we got Collingwood Carlton. Now this is the most ancient rivalry, so we've got to put this in ultimate. You probably got to put this first, let's be real. Doesn't get older than those two. Doesn't get more fierce than those two. Even to this day, last game of the season last year, we saw the two fight off. Collingwood win, finished top 4. Carlton win, finished top 8. And that was a cracking game. Now, next up, I'm not sure about this one. Carlton Essendon, it's just okay. I feel like those two, is it really a big rivalry? Like, obviously, they're two big Victorian clubs. But just because you're two big Victorian clubs doesn't mean there has to be a rivalry there. Richmond Carlton, it's not really a rivalry that bad. I'm going to say it's strong. Like, obviously it's still a rivalry, but I feel like they're more rivals because they play round 1 every year. But there's a lot of history there. There's always a good game between Richmond and the Tigers. Who could forget in, where was it, 2013, when they beat us in the finals, because Essendon, or the drug saga. Anyway, that was bad times, but it's just a strong rivalry, nothing better. Now, for me, I'm putting this first. Hawks Geelong, undoubtedly first. That is the Kennett curse, let alone. But think about arguably the greatest grand final and game ever. The 1988-78, one of those grand finals back in the day between those two, where Dermot Burden got his ribcage absolutely caved in the opening minutes of the game.
Behind play.
Get up, Squid!
Here we go. Bang!
They put a lot of planning.
But that rivalry is amazing. I mean, as a kid growing up, those were the two. Those two, when they played, there was always something going on, especially when they were both at the top at the same time. These days, it's not as good because Hawks suck, but that is creme de la creme rivalry. The demolition derby time, the Perth boys, West Coast, and the Fremantle Dockers. I'm going to put this in ultimate as well. I feel like it's not as good as the showdown. You know, the Ballantyne after the siren goal, or hit the post, so it wasn't goal.
Kicked that straight
He's
line.
going on the drop punt from 52 metres out. It's on line. It's there. It's going to the line. It's touched. It's a point. It's a point. All clear. Let's listen. It's a point. West Coast have won.
The Andrew Gaff hit on Andrew Brayshaw, sparking him out, breaking his jaw, and the fight's there.
Oh, jeez. And he's got 3. We'll come back to this incident with Brayshaw. I think it's Gaff. Ball over. This is starting to look like the derbies of old. Back when Pav was throwing his weight around all those years ago.
50 metres. Where's the ball? 3 men. Come with me. It's a 50 metres.
Well, Andrew Gaff's wisely just standing on the outside of it. So Gaff digging deep. Oh, he was there, and they got him. Ryan and Johnson.
He looks fine. This could get interesting.
A volatile situation.
Obviously, the demolition derby in 2000.
In any case, Gardner and Pavlich added immediately down in the goal square. A couple of heavyweights. And Gardner is leading with that left. Pavlich is going after him.
They're coming from everywhere, Dennis. Again, the tempers are flying. So the players are very, very aggressive. Dale Kickett has just thrown a couple. Look at this, Dennis. This is not good.
Wait for the siren, and the Dockers will win a remarkable Western Derby.
Absolute mega game there. Fists, so many fists flown. But you can't deny that's an ultimate derby. There's too many in the ultimate right now. We got some. Oh, this is another strong one. I'm gonna put this in brings in a crowd. I made a video on this before. Check it out. It's the greatest modern day AFL rivalry, which is these two. They're not as good as the the nostalgic rivalries, but in terms of current day, the last sort of 5, 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, they're the ones. They're the ones who have been the best rivalry for me, at least. Who could forget games like the prelim final in 2016?
Belly, bottom belly, no one between he and the goal. Paddles it up, gets back onto his left foot to hit the front. To hit the front. The Dogs are in front by a point. Bontempelli.
The upset the Dogs caused then to beat the Giants at home, and then obviously win the flag the week after. The Toby Green kick on Luke Dahlhaus.
Pointing to be here or there. This is interesting.
Smacking Caleb Daniel in the face.
I saw something that we didn't. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So we couldn't see that.
The 2020 game where Nick Haynes went for the toss, and then everyone tried to rough up Marcus Bontempelli.
He can look after himself as we have a look at what the 50 was paid for.
Yeah, they're both in.
It's just a really good rivalry, and I feel like they genuinely hate each other, and there's a lot of distaste for each other. Yeah, the Ryan Griffin trade, the Callum Ward trade, there's a lot of history there, despite not being that long. Now, I'm excited to put this one in finally, in not really. It's just not really yes, it's a derby, or a derby, as you might say, but come on, let's be real. I just don't really get excited it's just not as good as any other derbies, really. If I look at the list below and above, that is probably one of the worst, if not the worst. Now, there has been some great games between the two, especially in finals. They seem to meet each other a lot, but in terms of a derby, perhaps that's sort of resemblant of the fact that Giants haven't been in the competition long enough to solidify a decent rivalry, but if they had to choose someone, it would be the Swans, but as a rivalry together, not that good. We're going to go with the Swans and Hawthorn. Now, this was kind of more of a rivalry in recent years through the grand finals in 2012 and 2014, and then some other things, but I'm just going to put it in okay. I don't think there's much there, especially recently. It's definitely fizzled out where it doesn't have the same meaning. Bombers Hawks, line in the sand. Now this has to be number one. Let's be real. You can't deny the line in the sand game, let alone, makes this the best rivalry in the AFL.
A lip there as he copped it. Really hard from Chance Bateman.
It is on everywhere in here, boys. Spot fires all over the place.
And there it is, Pachoni, and Vandenberg letting lefts and rights go to the feet.
You can't do that.
And here comes Welch to remonstrate with Vandenberg.
This is the 1980s revisited.
Well, I tell you what.
And then you combine recent game, not recent, but the last 15 years, the Matthew Lloyd hit on Brad Sewell.
Gains about 5 metres. Sewell hit hard by Lloyd. And Sewell is out.
They're going to be angry.
Here we go.
They are going to be angry, the Hawks. They're angry.
Hodge and Lloyd, Osborne coming over the top.
And I tell you what, Matty Lloyd, you're the target.
That sparked absolute outrage on the field. Campbell Brown throwing absolute haymakers because of that at Matty Lloyd, and just the distaste those two have for each other. Through history, even now, it's common knowledge that those two hate each other, and they really do. And the games between them, the game where Warple kicked that goal against Michael Hurley recently, I mean, still to this day, they're a great game when you watch the two of them. So deservedly, they are in ultimate number one. Now we've got the Queensland derby here. I'm gonna put this in not really as well. I think, look, for the two and not really, they're both sort of because it's Giants and Gold Coast and they haven't had enough time to brew a decent rivalry. If I had to choose one, I'm going to do Giants ahead. I feel like Giants one is better, has been better because of the final stuff. Yeah, that's probably it. Okay, Brisbane, Collingwood. Now, this stems back in my eyes. All of these stem back 2 times, I don't remember. But this one particularly stems back probably to those 2002 and 2003 flags. That Brisbane beat Collingwood in the grand final there. I feel like it stems back to them, but even recent years, they've met in some big close games between the two. As a rivalry, it was ultimate with those grand finals back in early 2000, but now it's just okay. Nothing too special for me. Collingwood Richmond, I'm putting this in brings a crowd. You know what? This should probably go... Yeah, I'm putting this in brings a crowd. Now, I feel like it's not as good as any of the others. I can't I can't lie, all of these top ones are brilliant. But Richmond-Collingwood, it's always going to be a massive rival, let's be real. There's not much else to say. Two of the biggest fan bases, so you can't get much bigger than that. The 2018 prelim, famous game, when Mason Cox absolutely teared us a new one, or tore us a new one. English.
So Adams, Cox again. Oh, it's getting better.
But yeah, that's what brings a crowd, and that's top dog, top dog. Last, the Eagles, Collingwood. Now this, I feel like, is because of the 2018 grand final, also the 2018 final series, some recent game, 2020 final series as well. I'm gonna put this in strong. There is a history to it, but it has fizzled out since the Eagles have turned shit and the Pies have turned good. Now, are there any other rivalries that are missing out? I mean, to be honest, you could put teams like Essendon, Carlton, Richmond, and Collingwood all as different rivals, which they already have, but there's no Richmond-Essendon, which should arguably be a rival. Geelong, so Geelong's an interesting one, right? There's only one here of Geelong. Now, Geelong do have rivalries with Richmond in recent years. There's been some rivalry there. But for me, the one these two teams, this tier list is missing, Geelong St Kilda. That is such a good rivalry. Those years where they're both at the top, I think that's got to be in there. If St Kilda had to have any rival, I would probably put Geelong or Collingwood up there, to be completely honest. Melbourne. Do Melbourne have any real rivals? In the past, maybe you could say Richmond, but maybe that's reflection of me. Melbourne Collingwood, I would say, is a decent rivalry there. North Melbourne Essendon. Where's that rivalry as well? That's the second one that has to be in there alongside Saints Geelong and even Saints Collingwood. But North Melbourne Essendon, the Marshmallow incident with Kevin Sheedy, that's a big game. That is a massive game for me. That's probably it. I might be forgetting some. If you look through the history, there are probably way more rivals. All in all, I'm pretty happy with this list. What are your thoughts on it?